Hi everyone. We decided we were going to go ahead and separately record this. Our slides were acting a little bit weird, and we wanted to ensure that everything was super clear when folks look back on the recording. So that's what we're doing right now. So welcome to everyone to Kentucky Youth Climate Strike's COVID-19 Climate Crisis and Racial Justice Training. Today we're going to be discussing key historical context to help us better understand the moment that we're in, the intersection of these three issues, how the system we're living in impacts these, and some key solutions to ensure we are combating all three issues simultaneously. So we're going to begin with a really quick introduction of our training team. So my name is Fernanda. I use she, her pronouns. I'm from Louisville, and I will be one of your trainers today, and I'm going to pass it to Natalie.
Hi everybody, my name is Natalie. I use she, her pronouns. I'm from Frankfurt and I'm a trainer, and I will give it to Isabel.
Hi everyone, thank you so much. My name is Isabel, I'm from Puerto Rico, and I am also a trainer. I'm going to pass it over to Lucy.
Hi everyone, my name is Lucy. I use she, her pronoun. I'm from Louisville, and I will be your chat moderator today.
Great, so chat moderators drop in definitions. Not entirely sure how we're going to work that. We're going to try our best, but if worse comes to worse, if you go to the description of this video, we should be linking our glossary that has all of the terms that Lucy will be dropping into the chat throughout this training. Great. So before we go any further, we still want to first take a moment and acknowledge the land that we are all currently on. Today and every day, we exist on land that has been stolen from its original inhabitants, Indigenous people. In Kentucky, we are in the land of the East Cherokee and Shawnee people, and we're watching as Indigenous communities are disproportionately impacted by the COVID pandemic, exacerbated by a lack of access to clean water and healthcare. And for those of us who are not Indigenous, we need to continue to show up by supporting Indigenous organizations and movements for change. So going into this, we have a couple of norms and some tech things, but that is a little less applicable for this. So we're going to go ahead and skip over those and talk about the objectives for the training. And would love if maybe someone else who's helping with this call could read off one of those objectives, or read off all of them.
I can do it.
So, never mind.
One, we understand how current events relate to the history and roots of America. 2, we leave with an understanding that these issues are not standing alone, but exist because of each other and are intersectional. 3, we are able to talk to others about this and walk away with examples and work we can be doing to combat all three.
Awesome, thanks for that. So now I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Isabel, who's going to take us into some historical context.
Yeah, thank you. So today we're here to talk about how intersectionality. So to get us started, if anyone wants to read the definition off the screen, that would be great.
I can do it.
Or I can read it. Awesome.
Intersexuality is a framework of conceptualizing a person, a group of people, or social problems is affected by a number of discriminations and disadvantages.
Thank you so much. So starting off, we're going to talk about the historical context of our country in relation to the moment that we are in. The very reason we have a world where we are moving towards climate chaos, and the reason we suffer so much from such profound inequity is because America has a deep-rooted belief in this country that some lives matter and others don't, that some lives are disposable and others aren't. This is the same reason that there are pipelines through Indigenous lands, polluting facilities, working class, people of color neighborhoods, why a city in Kentucky, Louisville, is one of the most segregated in the nation. We must recognize that in the midst of all these issues, we are not free until all of us are free. And we won't have solutions like the Green New Deal until we address the sickness that lies in the soul of America through things like white supremacy. We'll get to that in a bit. It's important to note that recent uprisings are not just due to a new awakening on the part of the majority of white people, but unrest that marginalized communities have felt for generations due to growing inequality. Racism is something our future was founded on through slavery, and to digest the system we live in, we're going to do a quick case study of Minneapolis. Minneapolis has been divided across racial lines, which created entire neighborhoods where housing and businesses could not apply for loans and where poverty persists today. Schools here have among the worst achievement gaps for children of color in the country. Black Americans in Minneapolis and nationally have borne the brunt of the fossil fuel era, dying from air pollution, cancer from exposure to toxic chemicals, and severe weather at greater rates than national average. Near North Minnesota, an area that is predominantly Black, is surrounded by a number of polluting facilities and infrastructure, including roofing manufacturers, a trash incinerator, a metal recycling plant, and several major interstate highways. The zip code that covers so much of North Minneapolis is the highest hospitalization rate for asthma in Minnesota, according to Minnesota Public Radio. It's also home to the highest rates of lead poisoning among children in the city. The COVID-19 mortality rate among Black Americans is 2.4 times higher than it is for white people. And in Minnesota, Black people make up only 7% of the Minnesota population, but they account for 16% of the 23,000 confirmed COVID-19 cases, and this number just keeps going up. So, Minneapolis police use force against Black people at 7 times the rate of white people, an astonishing number that is visible locally and nationally. Approximately 20% of Minneapolis' population is Black, but when the police get physical, nearly 60% of the time, the person subjected to that force is Black. The numbers speak for themselves. The Minnesota police force is more likely to apply unwelcome, violent force on Black people. Black organizers in Minneapolis have been building support and power for years now, and they have strong support. After the killing of Demar Clark, there was sustained occupation of the 4th Police Precinct in Minneapolis. This was in 2015, and it was 18 days long. People set up community food infrastructure, massive protests, and highway shutdowns. These were organized by organizations like Black Visions Collective and Reclaim the Block, and their vision was an abolition of police, and they organized around actions that we've heard so often, such as defunding the police department. But that may be a new concept for some folks. Then recently, the election of Major Jacob Frey occurred because he poisoned himself as someone who would achieve these goals. At this point, the police department has had 5 years to sort out the mess. 5 years to prevent horrific incidents of police brutality like this one. More than 5 years of protests, occupations, and sit-ins. In the aftermath of George Floyd, they have been rising up with even larger numbers, but it's important to remember the long struggle this community has endured. Let's watch a video that signals their big victory. All right, so that would be a video of the major having to do a walk of shame because he decided to ignore the people's demand to abolish the police. And it's really clear that we need to view this moment understanding what the roots of these problems are. There's not only one explanation for racial disparity, but many. Now, Black people have historically struggled with their health compared to white people, and a reflection of the United States' long-standing socioeconomic stratification by race. Think the redlining we showed earlier. Black Americans also have the highest rates of pre-existing conditions that make patients more vulnerable to COVID-19. America still has a legacy of segregation, and this has resulted in generational poverty. Black, Indigenous people of colors are also more likely to work jobs that have been considered essential and cannot be done from home, which increases the risk of their exposure to the virus. Spreading across intergenerational households and exposure to air pollution could also help explain the high infection rates among Black people, air pollution from factories and plants. This slide demonstrates other factors involved. It's important to think about language. Within the climate movement, the term livable future has been used, and while we clearly stand firm that all people are deserving of a safe and livable future, we must realize that this phrase often does not mean the same thing for Black, Indigenous, people of color communities that have been fighting for their livelihoods for generations. This moment has shown us that these systems more clearly has shown us these systems more clearly as these issues are elevated, but also shows that many of us do not know our country's true history and the root of these inequalities. As we dive into this today, we invite you to share any other information in the chat as it relates. We learn the best collectively and collaborating. As a climate justice org, we are committed to the reality that climate change is a result of legacy of extraction, colonialism, and slavery. These may be new words for folks. So we're going to drop a definition in the chat of what colonialism means. A lot of times when people talk about environmental justice, they go back to the 1970s or 1960s. But when they think about slave quarters, the people who get the worst food, the worst healthcare, the worst treatment, and when they are freed, who were given lands that were eventually surrounded by things like petrochemical industries. Does it sound familiar? Let's dig more into this. With the arrival of slavery came a repurposing of the land, chopping down of trees, disrupting water systems and other ecological systems off the labor from Black and Indigenous peoples. This taking down of land, not just for expansion, but to search for gold, to take down mountains, to kill Black and Indigenous people, all of that has a long history in this country. Way back in 1636, Boston created the Night Watch, the first real police force in America. In 1704, the first modern-day police force was created. These police forces intended to protect a specific type of American citizen, white people. Before this, laws were passed to protect white people that harmed enslaved people, and their rights are slowly removed from them by restraining their ability to grow food, earn money, or become literate. The pseudo police forces enforced these racist laws, thus showing us that the beginning of policing was intended to police enslaved people and harm them. Though police forces are no longer referred to as slave patrols, their purpose has not changed. Police forces exist with the intention of harming Black, Indigenous people of color, particularly darker-skinned Black folks. This can be seen by the infamous legal cases such as the acquittal of George Zimmerman, the murder of Eric Garner, or the murder of Tamir Rice. For all of you unfamiliar with these cases, they have two things in common. The murderer was a Black man, and the police murderer was never charged. Despite the laws slowly changing, emphasis on slowly, lynching was made illegal in the year 2020, the essence of policing has remained the same. White people do what they want, and Black people suffer. This legacy still persists in the ways our communities are laid out and by the resources they are given. Your diet and behavior are driven by your circumstances. If you only have fast food in your neighborhood, but you don't have access to a grocery store, what are you going to eat? If you don't have access to healthcare in your neighborhood and you don't have insurance, what are you going to do? And when you do have access, it may be poor quality access. Context matters. Place matters. COVID-19 has highlighted both the climate crisis and deep-seated systemic racism our country holds. This is because COVID-19 has made a lot of the populations we made invisible, visible. Particularly essential workers in services like food, transportation, the energy sector, and waste management. People of color make up the majority of essential workers in food and agriculture, 50%, and in industrial, commercial, residential facilities and services, 53%. The coronavirus cast a spotlight on largely unnoticed segments of society who make up the essential workers, from low-income people included neighborhoods, to residents of nursing homes and prisons, to workers in the nation's meatpacking plants. These are largely the same communities who have been over-policed and most impacted by the toxicity of fossil fuels, further proving these are the folks who the system is structured to be oppressing the most.
Thanks for that. So now that we have dug into the roots of this country's history, we want to talk about why the system is the problem, because we know the system was designed to convey privilege to some and not to others. So we're going to look at some quick facts that show this. So in New York City, COVID is killing Blacks and Latinx folks at 2 times the rates of whites. More Black, Indigenous people of color are having to go in person to work, and through this, we still have racist health structures and inequality happening. The social and economic system we have is not designed to be fair. It was created to extract value from the natural world for specific groups of people. Any clue who these groups might be? You can take a second and think about it. Yeah, so we're talking about mainly white, male, and rich people. Why? Because these are the people who historically have held positions of power, been credited with work, and had privileges not afforded to others. I think we're maybe, yeah, one more slide.
My bad.
You're good. So since the primary focus for corporations is to maximize profits, corporations will often fight to exploit resources at unsustainable rates and pay workers at lower rates compared to the work that they actually do. So in relation to climate change, you can think of companies like ExxonMobil who have been acting in their own interest, and you can read a little bit about that on the screen. Environmental regulations in this country, they're not colorblind. If the laws and regulations were enforced fairly across all racial ethnic groups, we wouldn't have something like environmental injustice. So why do y'all believe we have communities with more sources of pollution? Or why do you think that low income or BIPOC communities have more pollution present in their backyards? And we're gonna just take a second and you guys can think about it again or pause the video. So there are a few reasons. First is these communities often don't have a strong political voice. In many cases, white, higher income communities, you have more political power because of your economic power. Businesses often surround these types of areas. So this NIMBYism, not in my backyard, can stop an incinerator, stop a landfill, stop a highway from being built in those neighborhoods, versus a lower wealth community of color, because they don't have the quote economic capital, they don't have a seat in the boardroom, and they don't have the capacity to prevent the setting of these types of things in their community. Another really important thing to remember is these are working class people. This presents numerous barriers in standing up against these injustices. Balancing jobs, unreliable transportation, a culture where this isn't the mainstream, or even where it's stigmatized to stand up because so many folks are just trying to survive. These are truly like all factors that are boundaries. People in power often make decisions that harm communities of color and advantage white communities. We see the example of when the Dakota Access Pipeline was rerouted from a primarily white town after pushback through instead the Standing Rock Reservation. Flint has been in a water crisis since April 2014, and 48217, located in Detroit, is the most polluted zip code, and its population is 80% Black. Can anyone think of other examples? Maybe someone else on this call can share one of where they've seen the system treat lower income or BIPOC folks more oppressingly. If no one has one, I can totally give one, but would definitely love to hear from one of you.
I mean, in Puerto Rico, that has a majority of poor, low income, and BIPOC people. They're treated differently and worse than the United States in relation to the climate crisis and a bunch of other different crises that are going on.
Thank you for that example. Yeah, for sure. So moving on, we're going to talk about how the system has exacerbated COVID-19, the climate crisis, and racial justice uprisings that have been extremely present this past month. So starting with COVID-19, for one, the system has emphasized the stark class divide in the United States, and shown that the system is set up often to value profits over people. So you can think about employers not practicing social distancing or really rushing to open up. While there is like this economic burden, there is also an impact on everyday people's lives. Second, climate crisis. So it's the same story here. Communities have had to choose between their health and livelihoods across the country, working in the fossil fuel industry. When industries even found out about global warming, they had a choice to take action, but refused. So we're going to learn about some of these companies in just a second. The intersection of racism and climate change is purposeful. It's not accidental, and we got here because of our history and dynamics that have always been present. So the most important thing to remember from this section is that climate change and COVID-19 are both racist because the system that caused it or exacerbated it is racist, and racial injustice occurs because the system set it up that way for it to occur. So I'm going to pass it on to Natalie.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Fern. So we can see how all of these issues are really interconnected to the point of not being able to separate them. And so we know it's so important to recognize that racial justice is climate justice. And that means addressing police violence is connected to climate policy. So it's really not surprising that the communities that are the most impacted by COVID or by the climate crisis are the ones that are most targeted for racial violence. And it's all the same communities all over the United States. And you can't treat one part of the problem without the other because it's really just so systemic. So COVID has changed all of our lives very, very quickly. And it's revealed that our government is truly incapable of dealing with a crisis. COVID killed 123,000 people in the United States, and we have over 50,000 more deaths than any other country in the world. And we are not the largest country. While horrible in many ways, COVID has really shown us what we are lacking and exposed social and economic disparities. If we don't have the resources and leadership to handle a pandemic, we definitely do not have the ability to combat the climate crisis when it hits. So we have to really learn from this and be prepared for the future. So I just want to take a moment to recognize, if Black, Indigenous people of color had died of COVID-19 at the same rate as white Americans, at least 15,000 Black Americans, 1,500 Latino Americans, and 250 Indigenous Americans would still have been alive. And to me, there are no words to really truly express the unjust nature of this system just from that example. Like personally, when I read that for the first time, I felt sick to my stomach. But we know that there's no justice for any of us until we get rid of the racism in this country. The 14th Amendment did guarantee everyone equal protection under the law, but it's still not accomplished. Like, racism pervades our courts, our police department, our jobs, living situations, our healthcare system, and so much more. And racism is something that's always existed in our country. Some of us, granted, have not been directly affected by it, but we know it's a dire problem. Other people have lived in a racist environment for their entire lives. And we have to recognize and realize that while we may not have personally suffered from racism, that a racist society impacts all of us in a negative way. And truly, exploitation is one of the root problems. We exploit each other, we exploit the earth, and we do nothing to fix it. And this is what we have to change. Because all in all, we've created a system where Black Americans die disproportionately of COVID, and we're doing nothing about it. While racism is ingrained in our society, we can hope with everything going on that we're trying to confront it now and walking down the path of truth and reconciliation. So on a different topic, this has not really been said enough. COVID is the result of environmental degradation. We cannot continue to destroy natural systems, send species hurtling toward extinction, dismantle wildlands, and not expect those systems to go haywire. And this includes viruses that can jump species and create a global pandemic. We can't keep exploiting the natural world and destabilizing the climate without consequences. So we know that in every movement, there's opposition, right? People who have been swayed by the propaganda or those who work against the movement for either profit or power. And some people in corporations even go so far as to cover up the truth for their own gain. Can anyone name who those people or corporations might be? You can just, would one of you just come off mute and give an example? Yeah, Koch brothers. Yes, Fernanda. For sure. Yeah, so that is one example, as well as this is also shown in ExxonMobil investing over 30 million in anti-climate science propaganda. And they want to protect their business interests without care for the future of our planet. And this sowing of doubt in our country has lasted for decades. And it has been successful because the US unfortunately stands out as a climate denier in the global community. So I want to take a minute to go over the main causes of climate change. First off, we know that fossil fuels pollute the earth the most. We see this in the cars we drive, factories, airplanes, coal, oil, and much more. The second one might surprise you. It's actually fast fashion. So, with trends changing every month, stores and people have to hurry to keep up. Like, just think about all the clothes and shoes and accessories that people buy to look cool and trendy, and then they have to change it out the next month. Where do you think all this stuff goes? Number 3 is battery pollution. Most of us use single-use batteries. And then these batteries undergo a photochemical reaction as they decompose in landfills, and this causes the emissions of greenhouse gases. Number 4 is actually animal agriculture. And animal waste emits harmful gases into the atmosphere. Today, in the US especially, meat is a staple, and that means more animals, and that means more harmful gases. And number 5 is war, and this is really self-explanatory. When we set off bombs, transport troops all over the world, and kill people and destroy land, it's detrimental to the environment. What's the most important to note, however, is that all of these issues are systemic and they cannot be tackled on an individual basis. So on a more hopeful note, we've seen that the Earth can recover when given time. Population in New York City is 50% of what it was a year ago. Los Angeles before COVID was covered in smog. Now, however, the skyline of LA has cleared up and the buildings are visible. Also, the oil and gas industry has been on decline, and it collapsed in the middle of COVID. And this is showing that there is an opportunity for change. While transitioning to renewables may be expensive in the short term, in the long term, it would pay back many times over for both people and for the planet. So while we have previously said that COVID has highlighted our injustices, it's also drawn attention to the fact that the planet can recover and we can enact the change we seek. So COVID and climate change are both the results of natural systems spiraling out of control. They're the Earth's reaction to unjust and violent treatment. Violence is at the heart of racial injustice as well. We cannot continue violence against people and expect to heal violence against the Earth. Think about this example. A person who abuses animals is more likely to abuse people. Similarly, societies that abuse marginalized people are much more likely to abuse their environment. We cannot heal one without the other because the ethic that undergirds both is the same. We hope we are walking down this healing path that leads to social justice and helps establish an ethic that enables the climate justice movement to have success as well. Our relationship with the Earth is just as important as our relationship with people, and we must address that in its turn. So we're all here to learn, and in order to do that, we have to learn from each other. I want to give a chance for anyone who wants to share a story about how you have seen the connection between COVID, racism, the climate crisis, or how you've been affected. Open this up to anyone.
Yeah, so as a Puerto Rican, I've been affected by the climate crisis through stronger hurricanes and environmental crises, which can be seen in Hurricanes Irma and Maria. And this is also interconnected with COVID because we never fully recovered from Hurricane Maria, which means that our experience through COVID is a lot stronger and it's very intense, especially when people are losing water, people are losing power routinely, and it's all part of a corrupt government and then not full recovery from the hurricanes that were caused by climate change.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for sharing. So I'm going to pass it on to Isabel to talk about solutions.
All right, thank you so much, Natalie. So we've talked about the system we live in, we've talked about how the issues are interconnected, and now we're going to talk about how we can justly combat all three issues and enter into a more safe, vibrant future. One powerful form of visualizing this interconnectedness is found in this example written by a resident of Minnesota. Can someone read this? That's on the screen. Come off mute.
Having a racist and violent police force in your neighborhood is not like having a coal-fired fired power plant in your neighborhood, and having both, and maybe some smoke pouring in from a nearby wildfire. African Americans are 3 times as likely to die from asthma as the rest of the population. I can't breathe is the daily condition of too many people in this country. In low income and Black and Indigenous people of color communities, people are suffering from asthma and upper respiratory diseases. When Eric Gardner died in 2014 from New York City police officers' chokehold, and we heard he had asthma, the first thing said in a local resident's house was, "This is also an environmental justice issue."
All of this justice, thank you so much, by the way. All of this context is key, especially now when thinking about how the protests have been rising. The media has been reporting on these irresponsibly and dangerously, saying that protesters are inciting violence when it is often the other way around, and even being attacked themselves. This message using words like thugs or anarchists is nothing new, but it does spread a false narrative about the situation and what people are demanding. So how do we find these issues together? So how many of y'all have heard about the Green New Deal? I'd say a lot of you. And what have you heard about it? You've heard good and bad things about the Green New Deal. So the Green New Deal is centered on frontline solutions and ensuring that frontline leadership is able to move resources to their communities and able to deal with things like infrastructure and food security and the climate crisis. You can watch a really quick video by Boston Climate Strike that explains a lot more. Right. So I understand that the audio was kind of bad. So definitely watch this video by Boston Climate Strike after if you have the chance to, because it's a really amazing video to explain to the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal is ambitious, but a lot of people want it. Now we understand that we understand that a lot of people want to. Give me 1 second. My computer blacked out. A Green New Deal is super ambitious, but a lot of people want it. And now we must understand that. Yeah, I'm sorry. My computer logged me out of Google Docs. So I need to go back to where it was. All right. Efforts to slow down the climate change proceed on multiple paths. Besides technical challenges, there are social, economic, and political obstacles to overcome. On the technology front, there's undeniable progress, but the powerful political and corporate power that has evolved during the past century is impeding the changes that are needed to dismantle the fossil fuel empires responsible for the climate crisis. The same social, economic, and political obstacles are evident in the fight for racial justice. They impose an economic burden on people of color that inhibits their ability to take action for social change. An important thing to know is that Green New Deal includes racial justice as a key component, and that means part of fighting for it happens through anti-racist work. Can someone read this definition of anti-racism?
Cool, I can. So it's actively working to replace the current system with something that repairs past harms and redistributes power meaningfully. In favor of people of color is what is required of everyone in the climate emergency, especially those of us who benefit the most from how things are right now. We cannot fight climate change without being anti-racist.
Thank you so much. Looking back at history, Dr. King was not that popular. 1966, 64%, he had a 64% disapproval rating. And it's important to remember that the public often agrees with the principle but disagrees with the tactic. In our case, they agree with both, but it still requires more than simply voting or signing petitions. All good things, but things get done when organizing happens. What is organizing? Well, we have a whole other training that touches on this, but organizing is done by everyday people and is a powerful, meaningful, and effective way to bring change. Our organization is committed to this form of advocacy. We would love to have you. There are so many organizations doing great work as well. Let's think about a vision of the future. Some of it looks like solar panels for rooftops, and some of it looks like radically imagined police forces. We are going to watch a closing video and then share some opportunities for further learning going forward. Okay, so the audio is bad, but since it's such a long video, maybe click in the description the video titled Radical Imagination, and then once you're done, you can come back to this video. All right, welcome back. How does this video make you feel? Now take a second pause to think about how that video makes you feel, because it's really important. And what we want you to take away from this is that a better world is possible.
Great, thanks so much for that grounding. That video truly is so incredible. And we're so excited to continue working for this world, and we hope to have y'all right there with us. So thanks so much for partaking in today's training and opening up to learning about possible new concepts. And we're going to be providing some call to actions. I would love for you to think wherever you are about which ones of these you can commit to and how you can continue showing up in this moment. So the journey of bringing this information to others is crucial. In the coming weeks, you're going to be hosting a series of trainings, continuing these learnings. Maybe you're signed up for some, maybe like you're watching this YouTube channel, you said like, I can wait till they come out and watch them then. All of that is great. If you have any feedback for any of our trainings, would love if you could also, there will be a link in the description as well. Click on that for our feedback form, where you can tell us like what you liked, what you feel like could be improved on, things like that. Also, maybe think about a few friends you can get to sign up. The sign up link will be in our description as well. And see if you can like attend another training or watch another training. Great. So all of that will be in the description box, so be sure to check all of that out. Coming out of this training, we really do encourage you, even if you are watching this on YouTube, to sign up for our trainings, because you're going to get resources and follow-up emails regardless of if you have attended or not in person. These emails include a direct link to a resource list for racial justice learning, links to some learning circles that we have, which are basically, we have a white learning circle, non-Black POC, and then Black support group, where folks are really just about sharing resources, creating community, great things like that. And also, yeah, some maybe important links that come up after the in-person trainings. So if you want to share this video with anyone, we totally appreciate it, so we can continue to bring these trainings to other folks. We noticed that there wasn't really anything like this on YouTube, so we're really happy to be able to provide this for people. And also, if you like the training and want to consider donating, we would love to have your financial support, and you can find our Act Blue link to donate in our description as well. So thank you so much. If you have any questions, feel free to comment them, and we'll be watching that to see if we need to reply to any folks. So bye.